board committee, looking after our education, our training portfolio, particularly focused on youth. And within the youth, she's also quite active with educating young women and women at large in terms of energy and energy efficiency. I'll hand over to Devaksha. She will give the webinar, and then at the end, we'll have some time for questions. So please note down your questions, and we can ask them at the end. A question, Devaksha, do you prefer that we have questions coming in and you address them then and then, or would you prefer to have them at the end?
I think as they come in will be also good, because then I'd be able to
so
handle it.
I think let's do it this way then. If you have a question as Devaksha is presenting, since it is a webinar, you raise your hand and you give your question, and she will respond. I'll also keep note in the chat if you post any questions into the chat, and then I will just intone in, and Devaksha can address the questions. All right, over to you, Devaksha.
Okay, thanks, Matlaklo, Tida, Zadok, for the introduction. As Zadok mentioned, I am Devaksha Maraj, the Managing Director of Ikigai Engineering. So being part of the board, I wouldn't say thank you to the board for giving me the opportunity, because this is quite a very important topic on the EPCs, and we started off the webinar series, as Tida explained, with quite an informed response from the members who presented, and we had good sessions of interaction thus far. So I want to keep it very informal. The two gentlemen that who are accompanying me on the panel today, and I discussed beforehand how we're going to go about. So we may not necessarily stick to the questions that are asked, but we'll give you a fair idea by the end of all three of our discussions of how to actually approach safety and in the EPC context. So I'd like to share my screen. As technology may have it, please just let me know if you can see it. Sometimes technology fails. Can you also see? So thumbs up?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Okay, so just a brief background to who we are. So Ikigai is a management consultancy that's broken up into 4 different facets of the business, each of them basically involved in the energy field. As Zadok explained, I am very active in each of those, especially in the training and development side. So we are a tier 1 ESCO registered with Sanedia and DMRE, and we are quite involved in many of their projects currently. That's us. So if we're looking at phase safety, and one of the biggest questions that we were asked to address is, when do you actually need to consider? And I think that question speaks for itself. You need to consider safety from the word go. It's something that is not to be taken as at the back burner of any of the processes that we follow, or anything when you get onto site. So when do you need to consider safety? All the time, every single day. It's something that's inept in us. It is part of our life. But obviously, in terms of dealing with what we want to, in terms of regulation, legislation, government mandates, all of those things, it's highly important that we make sure we consider all of those items. So I'm looking at it in terms of safety, in terms of regulation, and what exactly is needed in terms of energy performance certificates for buildings in particular. And I gave you a screenshot of what has been released in the government gazette. And if you look at, I'm sure many of us have read this a million times, but if we look at what they speak to in terms of the applications of the regulation and the places that you have to enter. So to start off with, we know that probably the regulation is going to extend to other buildings that is not captured in what we see here, which is entertainment and public assembly, theatrical and indoor sport, places of instruction, offices. Now, if you look at offices itself, that's on its own tells you how much of safety you have to consider. To enter example government buildings, you have to go through vetting processes. To enter institutions, financial institutions, there's vetting process that all forms part of safety. As we all know, when we put our safety files together, those are the items that are asked for in the safety file. Vetting documents, certified ID of the people that are going on to site, fingerprints, police clearances. So it goes as far as that, and that all forms part of the OSH Act as well. So it's not something that should be new to anyone in terms of putting all of this together, and it's not items that should not be considered. It should be part of daily project management, so to speak. So I just wanted to zone in on this because you're looking at these places. Even if you're going to places of instruction such as schools, there's safety requirements that have to be taken into consideration when you get onto site. The other gentlemen that are on the platform will go get into further detail on that. But to answer the question of when you need to consider safety, this is what I'm bringing in for you. The levels of safety obviously vary from the different buildings that you're now going into, but at the minimum, you would have certain examples, certain items of PPE, certain forms that have to be filled in, and certain documents that have to be filled in, going into different levels of detail, ranging from when you're entering a commercial building to when you, okay, it's not here yet, but we shall be going into industrial or even in the residential sector. So safety is always considered. Okay, if you looked at safety in terms of SANAS, and I just put SANAS there very loosely, we're talking about the mandatory requirements that are required for the certification bodies or for the accreditation bodies or inspection bodies. One of the key things that the inspection body has to be committed to, and I will read it out on the screen. The inspection body is committed to safeguarding the health and safety of all its personnel and subcontractors. Commitment must be given to the following: preventing accidents and cases of work-related ill health by managing the health and safety risks during inspection activities. Now, if you look at that, there's various forms, policies, and procedures that have to be created when you're going through the process of accreditation. Now, this is not a tick box exercise where once you are certified, we do not look at that again, because safety somehow gets, as I said, at the back burner of all of this. But this has to be part of daily activities for the certification body and the subcontracting bodies that they bring onto the sites. The next commitment is providing clear instructions and information and adequate training to ensure employees are competent to do their work in a safe manner. Now, so I come from an environment where I worked in a smelter. Safety was one of the highest aspects that had to be considered when it came down to toolbox talks, when it came down to spot checks that were done by executive management on the site. If you were not prepared, there are dire consequences to do that. The same applies with working in building or commercial environment. We cannot let safety get pushed, as I said, to the back of our heads and just use it as a tick box exercise. I know many people in their toolbox talks just get the signatures of everybody and sign off. Do the people that we actually disseminating this information to actually understand the instructions of what needs to be done on site? That needs to be actually declared, and that needs to be ensured that they actually do understand what's happening. One of the third commitments is engaging and consulting with personnel and customers on health and safety conditions. So when we're speaking to our clients, they also need to understand the safety requirements when we get onto site. And if they have adherences that we need to now follow through on, that needs to be discussed at the outset. So if you're looking at getting onto some of the sites, they may have their own safety requirements, their own PPE that is required, or their own set of specialized PPE that's required. All of those sort of things need to be considered, even in terms of watching their safety videos, following their safety weeks, joining their teams in those toolbox talks, etc. We need to understand that at the outset. So safety will always go on with you. In terms of the mandatory requirements, you then will create your health and safety policies and then the forms and procedures that will go towards your pack for accreditation. So I zone in on the OSH Act, which is now certified to ISO OSH 18001, which is referenced in the SANAS procedures. If you look at the quality manual that you have to now create, which is your SAN 1702, there's several references to safety there, and I started to pull those out. If you look at the requirements for your technical manager, amongst other things, and you'll see it underlined there, one of the main aspects that they need to understand is electrical safety. So that's zoning in on the electrical side and safety that's around that. But obviously, as a technical manager, they need to understand the dynamics of safety when they go to site and what the lead assessor and hence junior assessors will be encountering on those sites and what preventative measures they will put into place to ensure those people on site are now working in a safe and healthy manner. And here again, your policy and your form is one of your key paperworks that has to be filled in for every site, every audit, every client. It's not something that's done on a holistic level, especially if you're doing a portfolio of buildings where you're sitting at head office and you're filling out all of these. It has to be done on every site that you go to, because every site is different. Continuing with the mandatory requirements for certification bodies, I zone in on TR 80, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And one of the clauses there, once again, if you're looking at 7.1.5, is what are the safety requirements that are identified when you are on site. So these are things that are done in terms of the risk management as well, foreseeing what could happen on site and understanding how you would address, how you would actually get your staff to work around that or to deal with what may happen on site. The references to that are also in terms of resource requirements. You get facilities and equipment procedures that have to be formulated. That's not, once again, a tick box exercise. You're referring to safety on that as well because of your personnel and your subcontractors that are on site and the procedures that they have to follow when they are on site. The one thing to note is, do they understand these procedures? So if it means actually having sort of these morning sessions where you're going through the site and you're discussing with the personnel that's going to be auditing the site beforehand, okay, this is the building we're at, this is what we need to take into account, these are the safety requirements for the site coming from the client, these are the items that we need to address when we are here, and how to actually do the walkthrough as safely as possible. And then another reference to safety comes in the process requirements, which comes down to the inspection methods and the procedures. So I haven't gotten into detail of that, but obviously if anyone here is not familiar with the actual paperwork that's required for the accreditation bodies, you're welcome to contact me offline and I can highlight to you where exactly safety is pinpointed in each of these areas. Okay, so I think I've come to the end of my very short introduction to where safety is coming from a regulation and accreditation side for SANAS. I did not see any questions. Just bear with me, I'm trying to go between. Okay, so yes, I see a question from Nandipa. Yep. Slide 4, regulation 3, as it relates to risk appreciation, is this done per project or these would be in the risk register? At what point are these OSH risks shared with the building owner, especially taking insurance as one of the mitigation as conducting of drills? Okay, Nandipa, so I'm going to answer your question in terms of my experience of energy auditing, and someone can actually intercept because I'm not completely familiar with what SANAS and the actual regulation may speak to in terms of this. But in terms of the risk register, you have to address safety for site. I would think that it should be done per site, because if you look at a project holistically, if you're looking at example, a facility management company that you may probably be contracted to, each of the sites that they may have will be different. The risks will be different. So ideally, in order to protect your personnel on site, it would be good to actually do a risk register or a safety form for each of the sites that you go to, and actually have forward talks before your personnel go to site to understand, as I explained, these are the risks that we are going to encounter on this particular site. This is how we're going to address it in terms of a safety perspective, or how you should actually deal with it when you are on site. Obviously, with buildings, the risks are not as high as when we're speaking on industrial side. I see Linda put her hand up. Linda? Hi, Linda.
Hi. Sorry, no, you can first continue. I will respond once you're done.
Okay. Okay. I would actually look at it from a perspective of doing it per site. I thought Linda would actually intercept to let me know if I'm saying the right thing, but that's how I would look at it in terms of the risk register and actually dealing with it. At what point are the arch risks shared with the building owner, especially taking insurance as one of the mitigation as conducting of drills? Okay, so I think when you're having these interactions with your client, it's best to actually sit down and put together these arch risks as a team. You from your inspection body side with your technical manager and your team, and the client, to understand what exactly is the risks on site. There probably is items that you may not foresee. The client is going to actually give you that feedback. Sarah, you have a question?
I have a comment, but there's a chance that Linda will also cover the same one. So let me defer to Linda first. And actually, let me comment and then Linda can comment on my comment. So with the inspections, this is part of the requirement for the accreditation for inspection bodies under 17 or 20. And so before you go to site, you want to do your safety assessment. Now with the buildings, there's a big chance that often you're going to have a portfolio of buildings, so multiple sites, but also it's potentially multiple similar sites. So you can do a safety assessment for the entire group of sites as such, and perhaps list the sites in there. And if there's anything different with a particular site, then focus on that one or just mention that one specifically. So you want to list the sites you're going to, do the safety assessment for the entire site. And if you have a particular comment for one site, put that in. Am I right, Linda?
Unfortunately not, Zadok. Firstly,
sorry, guys.
I want to apologize firstly for coming in late. I managed to join just now, and I saw the heading of the slide, which says safety SANAS, mandatory requirements for certification bodies, and then the slide refers to TR80. So I have two concerns. Firstly, the TR80 does not contain any mandatory requirements for certification bodies. TR80 is an inspection body document. Certification bodies is a totally different ball game, and I just want to reiterate again, please guys, let there be no confusion. TR80 does not contain any mandatory requirements for certification bodies.
So perhaps Devaksha meant to say certified MNV bodies.
What are certified MNV bodies, Zadok? They are not.
This would be such as the MNV teams for Section 12L and the MNV teams for EPC. Okay, so to have requirements, and perhaps they're not mandatory, they're technical guidelines, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so MNV
technical guidelines for setting up the ISO management system.
Okay, Zadok.
Yeah.
TR80 is a document for EPC bodies only, inspection bodies, right? And MNV bodies are also inspection bodies. They are not certification bodies. Certification bodies are companies, organizations who go out and who certify other companies to, for example, ISO 9001, 18001, personnel certification, product certification, etc. It's something totally different. Secondly, guys, SANAS, and specifically 17020, have got no specific requirements for safety, apart from one clause which says inspections shall be conducted safely. So we cannot now impose things like having a safety risk or doing a safety risk on each site, etc., etc. We cannot impose those things. It is up to each inspection body to decide how they are going to do their inspections safely. And we must please not make any, we can make suggestions, we can make proposals, but there are no mandatory requirements in any of the SANAS documents saying that this is how you shall conduct your inspections safely. So I hope that that clarifies it. I mean, obviously, safety is an all-important issue. There is no doubt about that. And we shall all go out and do everything we do safely. But we have to be very careful that we do not add requirements into 17020 or into TR80 in terms of what shall be done for safety. As I say, I just want to say that once again, 17020 says inspections shall be conducted safely, but that's where it basically stops. There are no requirements. Also, when it comes to risk, yes, you can include safety into your risk surveys or your risk analysis, but once again, it is not a requirement of 17020. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Thank you
Linda.
for that clarification, Linda.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. So at the beginning, I actually admitted you in because I wanted you to have a look at this. But at the beginning of the presentation, I did mention that the heading safety and dash SANAS was used very loosely in my presentation, and the subjects below that were actually in terms of the accreditation bodies and what they needed to consider when putting the packs together. So I will edit this for the members that are here today so that they can actually have a copy of this, but I'll change the heading. I did mention that it was used loosely. To go back to 17020, I see Mitesh's hand is also up and he may also look at that. So my understanding was that safety was addressed in that because you would be creating all of the policies, the procedure and the health and safety forms, which will speak to some of the requirements in the 17020. Can you comment on that?
Health and safety is not included in 17020. So 17020 is a standard, deals with the requirements for inspection bodies, and it focuses on how you actually write a management system which deals with the conduct of inspections. So if you want to have, excuse me, can I just continue? Can I just finish? If you want to add a safety management system into your integrated management system that you have at your company, no problem whatsoever. You can do that. But what I'm just afraid of is that we are now telling people that this is a requirement if you want to become EPC inspection body. So as long as that is clearly understood, and as I say, you know, the heading of the slide already implicates that SANAS says there shall be safety, and that is not true. You cannot say that. So your policies and your procedures can include safety management systems, but it is not a requirement for accreditation. You don't have to have it. All you have to do in terms of purely looking at 17020 in isolation, all you have to do is you have to have procedures to conduct your inspections safely. If you want to include safety into your risk analyses, yes, you can do so. but there is no requirement to do a risk analysis in terms of safety on each and every site that you visit. No such requirement in 17020.
Okay, thanks. Mitesh, you want to say something before I go on to the chat? I see a question from Nandipa.
No, I was just going to say that, Linda, I am going to, in my slide section, I am going to cover that part of safety, the requirements, which is really dictated by where you are going and the information that you request and what you put together for what you believe your safety requirements must be.
Okay.
Thanks, Mitesh. Yeah, I like what you're saying. When you say you mean your inspection body. So in other words, you are going to share with people what you do in your inspection body or how you see it. But you must please remember that those are not SANAS requirements. In this forum, we are sharing information with the colleagues to assist them in terms of how to implement or include safety in the way they work. But as long as we clearly understand that these are the things that we are talking about today are not SANAS mandatory requirements for 17020.
Before
I've
you
got
respond,
7.1.9.
I just want to emphasize what Linda said, and just to provide a bit of clarity for Linda as well. The purpose of the webinar was to explain the need to look at safety methods when going out to site. It wasn't to touch on what's prescribed by SANAS. So I think, unfortunately, the slide there gave out the wrong impression. Devaksha is not trying to prescribe what's required by SANAS, and as Linda said, there is no requirement by SANAS on having specific things in the system for safety. We're just trying to cover the need for safety, especially taking COVID into account and taking the fact that we'll go into some industrial buildings where you've got heat, electricity, gases that need to be taken into account. I think the purpose was to emphasize the need to have a good safety analysis as part of your risk assessment before you go out onto site. Over to you, Devaksha. I think you have a question to respond to with Nandipa.
Yeah, no, thanks, Zadok, noted. And that's exactly what I alluded to at the beginning of my presentation. And I did say I was using the headings loosely, which actually was not a good idea. Nandipa, I don't know if you want to actually voice your question, or would you like me to read what you have posted on the chat?
Okay, let just for sake of completeness, I think Zadok has actually included the intention, which is very helpful. And I like the intervention by Linda, because it's important for us to separate what's mandatory and what is a desirable position. Because if you go to the standard that we're talking about, or maybe I'm referring to 4.1.3, it's very clear. You must do the risk assessment. And if you're doing risk assessment, you will have to look at all the 8 domains, and the 8th one is health and safety. So on that score, I understand how to locate the webinar today, because it's looking at the elements of health and safety. If you go to mining, for example, you're not even using the OSH Act, you're using the OSH Act as applied to mining, which makes this webinar very important. However, I think what Linda is trying to express is that we must not create an impression of a risk management, which is a non-negotiable, being number one compared to the standard. It's a tool that you use to make sure then you have your risk register. But it is important then that we are clear that for today, it's about educating us within ourselves in terms of what are the elements, so that when you are dealing with each project, there's nothing that you forget regarding that sector that you're inspecting. That was my understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Nandipa. That's exactly the mandate or the reason behind actually having this webinar. Zadok, I think from my side, I am fine. I don't see any other questions. I think we must proceed to the next speaker. Mitesh?
I think I'll go next.
Okay. I don't know if Zarak's going to do an introduction for you.
I'll do an introduction as well for Mitesh. Apologies, Mitesh.
No worries.
Okay, I didn't get a bio for you, so I will just introduce Mitesh as someone that I know who also runs an ESCO, focused again on our energy efficiency industry. He, I believe, has a SANAS accredited MNV body, but I speak under complete correction. As we've seen with SANAS, it's very necessary to be very clear with what we're saying. And Mitesh will also elucidate a bit further on safety. Please, Mitesh, if you could just give us a very brief intro of yourself and your company. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So thanks, Zarak. I'm also glad that this, this topic is quite, it seems to be quite controversial and quite hot. So, and I'm going to, Joule Energy. I come from a company called Joule Energy. Joule Energy started in the certified energy auditing space. We've got a whole host of skills, including measurement and verification, certified energy auditing, ISO 50001 energy management system implementation, as well as auditing. I do have, I am a SANAS accredited body in terms of measurement and verification. And that, I think that we seem to be focusing now on utilities and utility management, but that's the sort of the evolution of Joule Energy and the services we provide. I'd just like to get off the topic of the discussions that Linda is having. My presentation is around why this is so important and why safety is so important and why it must be so important and centered around the people that are doing the work. So while I understand there's lots of regulations, I'm going to be talking about the different parts of regulations. I'm going to practically be talking about how, because of my accreditation, what it means and how I've implemented it. So some of the entities and some of the people in this group who are already accredited and aim to get accreditation, which is supported, I think, by everybody on this call. Let me just see if I can move on to the next slide. Sorry. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so back to Linda. Linda, ISO 17020 and the team under section 1.9. The only thing that is required, now remember ISO standards, I'm not saying it's, the only requirement is that the inspection body, oh, I see there's a spelling mistake, my mistake, sorry, shall have documented instructions for carrying out the inspection in a safe manner. So what does that mean? I've been to many sites where various sites require different types of safety requirements. If you go, for example, to a commercial building, it is very different from a safety perspective than going to a mine or a nuclear facility or the different types of facilities. So while people mention risk and risk management and risk assurance, one of the pillars of safety, it is different. It is different to each site you are going to. So when I look at safety, I look at policy. What's my safety general safety policy? How do I attack risk management for that specific sector? And I think, if in my view, that's built over time. You initially, when you start out doing these type of assessments, your next assessment will include other aspects to safety that you might not have picked up in the first instance. So groups like this and information sessions and knowledge systems really help you, and time, I guess, in the sector, really help you tailor your requirements and your safety, what you deem to be safe, and what the client gives you as feedback. So very important is what does your customer tell you before you go onto site, before you attack anything? What does it practically mean? Do you have your own documents that instruct how you want to carry out inspections in a safe manner? That is something that you develop, that you build. Prior to inspection, do you have a written confirmation from the client with any health and safety requirements that must be addressed from your side that you can comply with their side? So in a practical example, I couldn't go to a commercial building this year because I had to go through police clearance. I had to go through vetting. I had to go through a fingerprint system, and that on its own, it's time consuming, and that on its own was their requirements. It wasn't my requirement. My requirement to go into the building to make sure that I had various PPE in place, and I'll go through what general PPE requirements are for. I'm gonna scale it to buildings now, but there's a needs analysis that gets filled in from both parts. It's not just this is what there's a general guideline, but really, the practical compliance in that is really how you tackle it. The other thing that I want to mention about safety is that you should take safety should take obviously your safety questionnaires and your safety understanding and requirements have to be taken into account when you quote on a project also. So I know that will be addressed probably or has been addressed in the previous webinar, but in terms of pricing, you might need to go for a week for an induction process, which is time, and how do you cost it in. So I just wanted to make sure that is also covered in how you look at safety. So how do I look at safety? I've got a pre-visit questionnaire that I send to my customers. It's part of an information gathering system that I've got. It's under health and safety. I ask a very specific question. Please advise of any specific health and safety issues regarding activities and processes at the facility that we should be aware of in advance of any site visit. Please advise what, if any, personal protection equipment visitors are required to bring to site. Now, what does this information give me? In entities, there should be a health and safety officer. That health and safety officer should complete your document to tell you what their requirements are. Their requirements could be basic or it could be extensive. It depends exactly on where and what you are going to be visiting. So I mentioned this because EPCs energy performance certificates are going to require you to look at other aspects, not just space. It might require you to look at lighting. It might require you to look at significant energy use areas, because at the end of the day, you are doing some sort of energy audit when you go to a site. So this information then feeds me in terms of, okay, if there are any specific requirements, then you will have to do some research as to how you would mitigate against those requirements or those risks. You go through an identification process to say, okay, this customer wants X, Y, and Z. What are the risks associated with X, Y, and Z? And how do I mitigate against those risks? And that could be, for example, so I've got a list, I've got a extract from the Operational Health and Safety Act, and it mentions regulations as per, sorry, I'm just got the screen open here. Okay, there we go. It mentions safety equipment and facilities, including personal protective equipment. So the Act, the Operational Safety Act, prescribes taking into account the nature of the hazard, the nature of the risk that will be encountered. The onus is upon the employer. In this instance, it's not the employer. I say it's the person going to do the inspection. That takes accountability for the requirements that they need. It will be dictated by by the company you're going into, but I say you should take it into your own hands as well. So what are the protective equipment that you generally need to have? I would prescribe definitely safety boots. Safety boots are, I've yet to be to a site anywhere where they don't talk about safety boots. There's safety hard hats, and harnesses, not so much. I don't think in a building type of environment you'll need to go and have harnesses. But I believe as a standard for the type of inspections you're going to be doing, I would carry hard hats, safety boots, and protective glasses. Sometimes you might need ear protection because of the noise pollution that's in your as part of your audit process. But I mean, these are basic personal PPE that you will need to keep and start understanding that you will need to have in order to do some of the inspection. It might be more extensive, but again, it's going to be dictated by where you are going and what your customer dictates what you should need. So yes, there's a ISO, there's requirements in terms of, well, not requirements, but there's guidelines in terms of that. Again, your requirements will be detected by your customer. But then again, if you're doing, for example, a lighting audit, now you go into the Operational Health and Safety Act with regards to lighting per se. Lighting has its own requirements. So while we are doing EPCs and you are probably going to be doing lighting counts, you will be doing lighting counts, for example, if you need to exclude areas like basements. There are certain exclusions for EPC. So if you're doing basement lighting, for example, storeroom lighting, how do you exclude that? You'll have to take that into account. But I just want to go one step further, because while you do have the customer and you are doing the work for that customer, part of the Operational Health and Safety Act is there are minimum requirements for lighting levels. A lot of people don't take that into account when they're doing a lighting audit. The requirement for illumination levels are prescribed in the Operational Health and Safety Act. There are various areas and various industries that require different lux levels, but it requires you to sort of take information in that it will help you going further, where help you with that customer going forward, where you start taking lux levels and start looking at that as well as part of the process of what you are going to be doing. Because at the end of the day, again, the EPC side of it is going to be, where are you in terms of your journey as a building? How are you rated? Are you rated ATG? Are you inefficient or efficient? When gathering this information, there's a requirement also that if you're going to be working with these customers and then in essence doing good work in terms of EPC, the next phase is, how do you get that customer to become more efficient? You will then start looking at things like lighting, and lighting will, and I'm not saying lighting, I'm saying lighting as well as any other significant energy user area that you're going to be looking at, but I'm just looking at lighting for now. These are prescribed lux levels, for example, for various areas within buildings. I've just taken offices, but as we move along in terms of buildings and in terms of the types of properties and the types of sectors that are going to be require some sort of performance and benchmarking process, these are prescribed lighting levels as part of Operational Health and Safety Act. 100 these are lux levels required for certain areas. So in office halls entrance, 100, conference rooms and offices 300, and these are general guidelines. These are prescribed as part of OSHACT again, and then 500 lux level in terms of computer and where you're operating in terms of computers, using computers and machinery. And then drawing officers require a lot of light, obviously, because they need to see a lot of detail. So I think that is more or less all of the areas that I wanted to cover. And I was just mentioning that, yes, there are requirements, but a lot of the requirements get dictated by you and your evaluation of where you are going, as well as your customer. But there are also requirements in terms of various technologies, as you're going to be looking at those technologies when you are already doing part of your EPC. So I think that's all from my side. I can stop the share and open up my camera.
Thank you, Mitesh. There's a question from Nandipa. Nandipa, if you could please ask your question, Mitesh will take it.
Okay, thank you. And again, thanks to the presenter, a well-articulated presentation. However, I had wanted Linda to first help us, educate us, because it's clear, as indicated by the mandate of this webinar, that we are educating each other in terms of the project-specific requirements in terms of the OSH Act and in terms of various requirements. Now, I'm saying this because one of the questions I asked Linda is saying, which is very typical of government buildings, and you will have seen in a number of land, that there are buildings which you will find that they've been found non-compliant, right? In terms of one of the regulations, in terms of the OSH Act, whether it's noise or what. Now the question is, what then do you do? Because we need to speak to the realities on the ground. In terms of this process, what then do you do in that case? You actually are requested to deal with this particular building, and it's already declared by Department of Labor. Now, remember, these are private owned buildings, but they are used by government. I want to specify that so that you understand the context in which I'm asking this. So I would want Linda then to assist us, because the more I listen to the beautiful presentations, there are project specific and sector specific. But when you go to 7.1.9, it talks about instructions. How far generically do you become, Linda, in giving your standard operating procedures in the document, the manual itself, which might not go to the detail? Because like it's indicated, it's true, it will be project specific and how deep you go, because you're talking about operational risks in terms of OSH Act. But in the generic guideline that you're talking about in your strategic document, which I prefer to call it in terms of section 7, how far do you go, Linda? That's my first question, because then it will address the convergence between our webinar and complying with the requirements of the standard 170 whatever. So that's my first question. I don't want to go with to list all of them. I wanted to deal with that one first.
Chair, may I answer Nandipa's question?
Please go on.
Okay. Guys, this is complicated. Okay, so let me try and start from this point. Our webinar today deals specifically with safety issues concerning inspection bodies who are accredited to do EPCs, right? So that our topic is EPCs, inspection bodies accredited by SANAS, and the topic is safety. So as Mitesh has now clearly indicated to us in clause 7.1.9, that's the only clause in 17020 that specifically deals with safety. And what it says is that essentially you shall have not you, meaning your inspection body, shall have instructions in terms of how to carry out your inspections safely. And that's it. Now, let me give an example. 17020 does not tell us that we shall wear masks when we go on site. However, when we are accredited inspection bodies and we are going on site to do an EPC, we shall wear our masks because that is the law of the country in which we live. Right. So very, very similarly, in our country, there are certain occupational health and safety rules and regulations that we shall abide by. For example, if we go on site to do our EPC, and for whatever reason, we have to put up scaffolding. I'm just using examples now. If we have to erect scaffolding at the site as part of our work doing an EPC, we will have to comply with all the occupational health and safety rules and regulations that there are in place for using scaffolding, of which I don't even know what they are, because that's a very specialized area in its own right. So obviously, we will then comply with those requirements. So those requirements are the law of are part of the laws of our country. So in doing that, we shall obviously comply with that. But we now cannot say that those are SANA's requirements, because strictly speaking, they are not SANA's requirements, they are the requirements of our country. Now, coming back, Nandipa, specifically to your question, 719. It says that you shall have instructions on how to do your inspections safely. I cannot tell you how far you should go, and nobody can actually tell you how far you should go. That is going to depend on your own company management procedures, instructions, like Nitesh, in the examples he has given us in his presentation, he's telling us this is how my company does it. And because 17020 is not prescriptive, a SANA's assessor cannot come to your inspection body and say to you, Nandipa, you should have added scaffolding rules. Nandipa, you should have added that you must wear a mask, because those are not requirements of the standard, but those are things that you, as a responsible owner of an inspection body, shall have to include in your procedures, depending on the type of work, the type of buildings that you are going to go to. Now, your question in terms of arriving at a building and seeing that this building is not complying with other rules and regulations in terms of safety, etc., that there are in the country. As an EPC inspection body, you have no authority to address those things in that capacity, in your capacity as a SANA's EPC body. However, as a citizen of our country, you have an obligation to report those buildings that are non-compliant with safety rules and regulations to the relevant authorities. But you will not be doing it in your capacity as a SANA's accredited EPC body. You'll be doing it in your capacity as a responsible citizen of our country. So I hope that answers the question and that explains how we should be looking at these things. So essentially what we're saying is 719 gives us the scope to add whatever we wish in terms of occupational health and safety. Nobody can say to you, this is wrong or this is right, because it is open to for the purpose, actually, because everybody's circumstances are different. Some people will maybe just do small buildings, smaller buildings and things like that, so their safety measures might not be as elaborate as other people who go onto complicated sites, etc., and hence the openness, if I can call it that, of that specific requirement. So if you want to implement a formal occupational health and safety system that you integrate with your 17020 system, please do it by all means. That is your choice and that is your right. But you cannot then say that that is a 17020 requirement. You are adding that voluntarily to supplement and to enhance your management system. Thank you so much.
I just want to intone in again, just to clarify one more time before we have the next speaker. The purpose of today's session is not to speak on the requirements for accreditation or on the requirements for SANAS. What we want to talk about the general safety things you should be looking at in and around EPCs. And Mitesh did pull out one clause, and I just checked the standard myself. It's the only clause in 17020 that refers to health and safety, the need to look at health and safety, but it doesn't say how you should look at it. So I think when it comes to getting accredited, when it comes to the SANAS requirements for accreditation, please take that up with Linda privately. But thanks again, Linda, for your input. I'll just hand over to you guys again if you have any questions.
Is it me still? I just wanted to also add on to know what Linda is saying and while it might not be a regulatory requirement. I was asked by one customer whether I had workman's compensation and compensation of occupational injuries. That is an insurance part of the requirement that is not related to what is prescribed in any document, but it was requested from me. So I then had to go out and then I had to go and get workman's compensation, public indemnity, all of these things so that I could go do work on that site. So that I think back onto what everybody's talking about is that it is different for everywhere you go. It depends. You might come to an international company that has different requirements. You might have a local company that has a totally different requirement. It is all about how you take that requirement, how you digest it, and what do you put in there from those risks identified to mitigate against those risks. That's all. Thanks. So is that okay?
Nandipa,
Yeah.
please go ahead. Or perhaps Linda, just, I know we're not talking, this is not about what's required for accreditation, but there is a checklist that does go out from SANAS for accreditation. And according to it, TR 87.1.5, it says, where appropriate, the contract or work order control system shall also ensure that contract conditions are agreed, personnel competence is adequate, any statutory requirements identified, safety requirements identified. That is point number 4 in that list. So we can see that the need to look at health and safety is integral to how EPC should be carried out under these technical requirements, but also it is integral to, I think, how SANAS sees inspection bodies operating. Am I right, Linda?
You are absolutely right, Zadok. Remember, 17020 as a standard is not above the law. So any laws of the country, any acts, any regulations are, they take precedence when it comes to requirements. That's why I'm saying, if you are an accredited inspection body, a SANAS accredited inspection body, but you go onto site, and on site, there are certain occupational health and safety requirements. You shall adhere to those requirements, because those requirements take precedence. 17020 is just an international standard, but it's low on a lower level in the hierarchy. First comes, the acts, the laws of our country, the various regulations that regulate the work that we do, and then come our accreditation standards. So, and I think that's the very reason why 17020 is so vague, if I can put it like that, in terms of safety. Because if 17020 had to include specific safety requirements, where would it start? Where would it end? Because it's an international standard. Each country has got its own occupational health and safety rules and regulations. And I think that's the very reason why it's so vague. So yes, it's again, back to Nandipa's question. Nandipa, it's really up to you. I cannot tell you what you must put in, but there's no limit. As long as what you put into your procedures are of such a nature that you are that would enable you and your staff to conduct your inspections safely, and also in terms of whatever rules and regulations we have in our country. Thanks, Saro.
Yes, please, Nandip, go on.
Thank you, Linda. You've confirmed what I suspected, actually. I won't go to the T2M standard, which actually speaks into detail in terms of what we're talking about. I want because we're dealing with OSH Act and issues of health and safety, I want that matter to be addressed, because it's a real matter that you would want to issue. You will be in an EPC trajectory into a building which has been declared by labor in terms of the same OSH Act to be non-compliant. What do you do? Thank you.
Mitesh, have you got an answer? Or Devaksha, because this is a practical question. You go into a facility, there's a facility that has been declared non-compliant in terms of health and safety. What do you do?
Hi. So I think Linda mentioned it, that it's not our prerogative or not the inspection body's prerogative to address that with the client. But obviously, when you are putting personnel on site, it is something to consider, or something that should be highlighted. So as she even mentioned, it is your right as an individual to have safe working conditions. So I think to answer that from a practical side, it's a discussion that has to be held with your client, not in terms of calling them out, but in terms of highlighting that your staff will be on site and they themselves need to adhere to this, and probably addressing that in the risk register. I say this and stand to be corrected. I see Christo has his hand up.
Go on, Christo.
Morning, guys. Thanks. Yes. No, everything that you've spoken so far is very well put. The only reason why SANAS mentions the stuff that they mention referring to safety and so forth is to make you aware that you need to keep that in mind. However, that is for inspection. Safety is a total different issue handled by yourself. Take the recent KZN riots. You've got a client, you have 5 or 6 buildings that you need to go visit. What do? Do you go and visit during the riots? Do you participate in the riots? Do you land with a helicopter?
Take a gun and you go visit, just for the fun of it.
So the whole safety issue, again, comes back to you and yourself. If you know, to come back to the original question, that a building has been condemned, I'm not walking into a condemned building. I might be a daredevil at certain stages, but I'm not going to walk into a condemned building. Someone else wants to go in there, great stuff. So when my health and safety or the client's health and safety is in jeopardy, that is highlighted and work is stopped. So you cannot rely on someone else or an accreditation or a certification or something else to tell you how your health and safety should be defined. That is your own common sense. And therefore, we know there are unscrupulous people out there that will definitely ride the wave until the whole world collapses, but as long as they get rich, they don't care. Therefore, we've got stuff like OSH Act and health and safety requirements and. So bottom line, it comes back to what's your decision and is it safe to handle? And the easiest question, if you don't know what safety requirements is to be applied, is ask the client. They've got a set of typical health and safety issues they need to address. The mining industry has got a fixed set. You can't just join the crew in the cages and go down to 3,000 meters below and enjoy a shot on the lowest pub in the world. No, you have to jump through a whole lot of hoops to get through that. The same with the building management. If you're not qualified to work in a DB, you do not touch that thing. You don't go near it. Will you like anyone from the street to come and cut you open to take out an appendix that is burst? No, that's not good. The person is not qualified, but it's not safe. It's not healthy. It's not a sterile environment. And. So apply your logic, apply your common sense to this. I get the feeling more and more common sense and responsibility for yourself is more and more given to other people because it's not my fault. No, it's your responsibility, your accountability, your people. So if it's not safe, step away. Step away. Do not feel threatened. Do not feel intimidated. If it's not safe, you step away and you declare that we do not see this as safe. Therefore, once you can prove to us that it's safe, we can continue. Otherwise, we get out of this whole thing. All right.
Thanks, Christo. I think Christo puts a nice bow and a knot on it. This is about your own safety when you're working, and by extension, the safety of your clients wherever you work. And the standard 17020 can say and does say you should consider safety, but it cannot be prescriptive as to how you consider safety, because the sites that you go to vary significantly, the conditions that you would go to vary significantly. So you should have an idea or a guideline of how you should do your safety, but it will not be a prescriptive guideline from SANAS. I think that is the best way to put it, because it's for you, for your specific circumstances, for the specific location and area you're working. I hope I've put a bow on it. Dr. Sinamela, do you have a question? We've got one more speaker, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, true.
Okay. So let's take this last question from Dr. Sinamela, and then we can go on to the next speaker.
I wanted to comment and ask a question at the same time. So I totally agree with what Christo said, that you should use your common sense when you're conducting the APCs. But sometimes it's kind of impossible to just rely on common sense alone, because sometimes you go to the site and you're not really sure what's happening inside the building. You find that there's a mixed occupancy type of a building. So you have labs and you have offices. So relying on common sense alone is kind of dangerous as well. Thank you.
Okay, so before Teboho goes in, I just want to say one more thing, and this is completely from myself, has nothing to do with SANAS. So I just want to be clear with that. I think as part of a common sense approach, it's as part of that common sense approach, it is to document or to have a procedure within your own operations that requires that you consider health and safety as part of your risk. I have worked in a SANAS accredited body for many years, and before we went out to any site, for our own safety, part of our risk was to consider the health and safety for that particular area. You know, and I've also done a lot of inspections under the ESCOM program, and I went a lot to the power plants and all of that. And when I went over there, part of the procedure of actually getting onto site was to sit and have an induction on safety and all of that stuff. So I think just to reiterate Dr. Sinamela's point, it's that, and to reiterate it and tie it back to what I said again before, the health and safety is for you. So the common sense thing would be to put in place a procedure and a policy that you consider health and safety before you go out to site. But, you know, just to again reiterate what Linda said, it is not there is no prescription from SANAS on how you do that. Okay. If we have any more questions, I think we'll take them privately. For now, can we have the next presentation by Mr. Teboho Mokoena? Finally got an introduction here from Mr. Teboho Mokoena. Mr. Teboho is previously worked at Transnet as an engineering technician, and he worked at MediClinic as a certified energy auditor. He's currently at Delta Carbon, and his designation is sustainability engineer. Mr. Teboho, if you could please just give a brief intro of yourself and your company, and then you can get into the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Zodak. I think that's brief enough, you know, and very, you know, informative. So yeah, currently I'm with Delta Carbon, working as a sustainability engineer there. So yeah, we also, you know, it's more like a sustainability, you know, consultancy firm, which conducts verification advisory within the engineering and the energy sector. Yeah, and you know, we also on a tier 2 of ESCO, energy service company, as certified by SANEDI. So yeah, we provide tailored solutions to help our clients benefit from the growing green and related opportunities. You know, one of such services is certification of its buildings, building energy performance, which is in line with the regulation and since 15400, which is the energy performance certificate. So yeah, we do all sorts of services. Even on the next slide, there are services that we actually do. So that also, even the solar, we also venture into solar. We do solar as well. But our main focus right now, I think it will be the EPCs. This is also the ordeal of the day. So thank you very much, guys, for coming, and thanks for the opportunity. So yeah, I'll just you know, try to be as quick as possible, but not to miss important points as I go. So yeah, I think now I'll be presenting just to you know, make it you know, just simple. My topic will be also still based on health and safety management in the energy auditing. And one would ask himself or herself, like, how does safety in energy audit has to do with the EPCs? As it was more of a debate, if I can put it like that, or just more of brainstorming and sharing ideas. Yeah, I think it has been explained further. So we thought any going to any details onto that. So it's basically, when you're doing an EPC or when you're in the process of issuing an EPC, at some point you have to do a site visit, which in the process you have to verify like things like building floors, net flow area, check for exclusions, and like if there is a basement as well, etc. So it's more like you're doing a level 1 walkthrough audit, except that currently the EPCs is still based on commercial buildings. But since the plan now is to expand the occupancy classes maybe to industrial and manufacturing, then at some point you're gonna have to follow safety measures, street safety measures in those buildings. So in a way, in some other commercial buildings, like Dr. mentioned, you'll find it's a multi-occupancy, where it's a commercial and inside there's a lab and there's a industrial manufacturing sector there. So you still have to follow the procedures based on the environment of the building. So without any further ado, we'll move to the next slide. Okay, that's just the index and what we'll be discussing all about. So it go to be talking about accidents and hazards, and PPE as well, treating incidents. So it's going more into details on safety when you're there doing the site work or inspection. So yeah, our first slide there of the topic, just to get straight into it. So on the next slide, we have the definition there, and the question, what is an accident? So an accident is basically an unplanned and uncontrolled event that occurs due to unsafe acts or unsafe conditions. So sometimes they can be inevitable. You cannot really, avoid them because sometimes it's because of negligence or just unawareness. So you should try by all costs, to avoid accidents or incidents. But we will cover that, I think, in the treating incident topic. So now, if you can make sure that the workplace or where you're working or your site visit, it's actually, as safe as possible. Because not only that, the people are working, they'll be in danger to themselves, but also you as an individual doing a site visit, you can be exposed to danger because that someone's negligence can affect you. So you must be aware and be vigilant on what's happening around your surroundings. And then the next slide there, we have hazards. We have hazards, and then as categorized there, we have different examples of hazards or categories. So there's also a difference between an accident and an hazard. So a hazard, I would say, it's basically the potential source of harm or adverse health, effect on a person. And this happens a lot in the workplace or when you actually doing a site visit, where they are, you're exposed to different sorts of hazards. So this will help you identify those different hazards and how they can actually, be can be avoided, or can they actually be effective on a human on a human's life. So there on the top, on the right, we have different signs of hazards there. Normally they put them on the product or storage tanks and all that. So you should familiarize yourself with each and every hazard because proper or specific procedure is followed when handling with each hazard. So yeah, you must just make sure that you know what you're dealing with. But we'll go into details further, just like the next slide there. The next slide there talks about the physical hazard. Excuse me. So physical hazards basically, means the hazards that can cause physical harm to you. So the first we have noise there. So as you can, imagine when you're going inside a building and then they're busy there, doing some grinding and drilling. So you have to follow the procedure, the right procedure of, maybe wearing some earplugs so that you can avoid, the voice, the noise pollution. So yeah, it can can go as far as fire, vibration, high exposure to sunlight if you're working long hours, on outdoors site visits, and that can lead to a lot of some diseases like skin cancer, sunburn, or even eye diseases if you're not wearing glasses. So the next slide we have biological hazards. So biological hazards, or as also referred to as biohazards, they can include gases, fumes, like medical waste or samples of microorganisms. So those are like things that can affect your health, once inhaled or being exposed to. So we also have airborne diseases. Currently, we have COVID, meaning, you have to wear a mask when you enter the building. So you must also, know which the gases you are exposed to, but probably as you enter the building, there will be maybe an induction or just you for information provided to you, which PPE you should be wearing, and what risk are you exposed to. So, and you can't wear a dust mask when you are exposed to like gases like smokes. So you must wear probably, a gas mask, because there are different gases and different PPEs for each. And on the next slide, okay, before I can continue, I see Nandipo was asking which form of audit is that. So it's more like an energy audit. Energy audit, it's sort of a walkthrough, level 1 specifically when you're doing a walkthrough inside a building or a facility. So that's why I was linking the two, the EPC and the energy level 1 energy audit. So just to clarify on that, Nandip, I'm not sure if it answered your question. But you can ask if as I proceed. So okay, go. You can go ahead.
I hear you're talking about the walkabout, but I'm trying to get a convergence between what we're talking about here and what we've been talking about. Remember that your standard talks about your internal audit and your external audit. I had wanted you to locate yourself within those, because it then talks to exactly the debate we've just had regarding health and safety. So the question is as follows. For example, if you are going to look at it as an external audit, health and safety, does it mean you will first link with the internal audit of unit of that particular entity that you will be dealing with? So this is the reason I'm asking these questions, because they go back to your reconfiguration in terms of your functionality and the work that you're supposed to do in line with the regulations and in the legislation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for mentioning that, Nandipa. And I think at the moment, since we're talking about EPCs, so it will be more of an internal audit. So if we can track back on what we've been discussing and what it has been mentioned, even I think Tita mentioned that it's not really an inspection body, what's required on an inspection body, but more of what you need to consider all in general, safety aspects with audits, verification in general, just being responsible. Because even when you're doing like, if you're just doing a site visit, a walkthrough, there might be people working around you, of which you are also exposed to risk and hazards. So you knowing the potential risk you're facing or you're exposed to, you also bring about safety awareness to yourself and to know how to avoid those hazards or potential harms. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but yeah.
I'm sorry.
Ken. All right, thank you. Okay, moving forward. All right, we have another hazard. We have ergonomic hazard. So that's basically an interaction that causes the user discomfort or strain. So it can be like poor lighting in the room, or if we're gonna do some frequent lifting, as you've asked, Nandipa, like how far should you go, as to doing the site visit. So it depends on how you want to conduct, the site visit, but it's important to note all the hazards that you can be exposed to, whether you're gonna be doing them or another person will be doing them, but just awareness as going forward and practicing safety measures as EPCs are concerned. So like if you gonna be just doing like just this normal site visit, and then your client is doing most of the work, that one, in a way, you can also avoid that you can just also, inform the individual about how about maybe the safety precautions that they should be adhered to. Not that you imposing that it's mandatory for them to do that, but just an awareness in a way. So just moving forward, we also have chemical hazards on the next slide. So the chemical hazards, they also based on different classes. So these ones, they can actually create a very harmful experience to a human body, maybe also when inhaled or consumed. So you must know which gas you are exposed to as well. And normally they should write on the either the cylinder or the storage tank that is there, that which sort of chemical is in there. So even if you're not the one working with the chemicals, but if you are in the space where they work with chemicals, you must also be aware of which chemical is there and know how to handle the setting if you are gonna be exposed to that chemical, know how to get help, and then that's where you can be safe. So you must know for sure before you pour, because you can never know what chemicals are you're mixing there. And then going to the other slide, which is safety hazard. So this would be the very important one, because it applies to a personnel that is, conducting the work or the site visit. So it's also your duty to prevent such hazards happening. So you must ensure the safety in the workplace, because you can just easily, trip and fall, and then you find there's a machinery on the site, and then you get injured. So it's your duty to make sure that as a personnel, you must be aware of your surroundings, avoid distractions like being on the phone call while you're working through like busy sections. So also again, if you are walking through the industrial site, so the sections that have barrier lines, they simply means you shouldn't cross them. So should you see witness or like see some barrier lines in maybe workshops or factories, then those the strict entrance for being in just to avoid either getting being injured, or just a destruction or on the personnel who will be working on the machinery. So you must always be aware of your surroundings. So especially with electrical hazards, you can just easily get shocked, trip and get shocked if there's an open live wire there. But we'll get into that as we go forward. So going to the next step, or the next slide rather, we have personal hazards there. So those are, I think these just simply like warn you or just inform you when entering the site. Normally they put them on the entrance of either a construction site or field where those precautions are applicable. So you must adhere to those signs. If they say you must wear a helmet, then you must wear the helmet. If it's face protection and eye, if they or gloves, if you're gonna be just doing some physical or inspections, then you must always adhere to those. So this will also bring us to the PPE section or topic, which is the protective personal equipment. We'll see that on the next slide. So there's personal protective equipment for each site. So you must know what to wear if you're gonna be visiting a site. Normally they tell you as you enter that must it's mandatory to wear a helmet when you enter a certain site. And with helmets, there are also different color codings. I think this yellow one here is for the laborers. There's white for supervisors or foremen. Then the green one, I think, is for the safety officers. Yeah, and then even with the overalls, so you find like maybe a site where they are exposed to a lot of flammable gases. So it's also advisable to know which overall you're going to be wearing. There are overalls which are flame retardant, which are if you are exposed to flames, then they can protect you from getting a high heat exposure. So yeah, safety boots, they're always advisable to wear when going on site. Then gloves if it's needed. Then earplugs if there's noise pollution. And then on the next slide, we have, I think that's just a basic electrical hazard checklist. So if you're gonna be working on on an equipment. So there should be a checklist for that equipment, where you note down, the measuring equipment. So check if it's missing a cover, damaged or broken, deteriorated, or just the bare life parts of wires which can shock you. So yeah, that's just the typical basic checklist form where you can fill it in, or if you're not the one working, the qualified personnel working on that equipment or machinery will have to be the one filling that form. And then second, the next slide, we have controlling hazards. So here, since we firstly mentioned that hazards might be inevitable or accidents, so there are ways where you can, control them. So the first one, which is the most preferred method, is to eliminate the hazard. So that's if it's possible to physically remove the hazard. That in that way, there won't be any accident at all. So if it's not possible, then you can minimize the hazard by maybe substituting with a lesser risk, or implementing engineering controls by changing maybe the way you carry out the activity or the job. In that case, it will reduce the impact or the effect of the risk. So like example, if you're gonna be using temperature controls to minimize vapor generation, then, or just by simply wearing the PPE, since you do also, minimize the effect of you getting hurt. If you can minimize or eliminate, then you can isolate. Isolating it's by restricting the area to a plant or the equipment, which is maybe by putting some barriers or installing some barriers or marking off hazardous areas. So in that case, you're isolating if you can eliminate or minimize. Then another slide, we have just some precautionary measures which you should follow, in order to ensure just a safer working environment. So the next slide. Okay. The first one, just make sure that the working environment is safe. Before you can do a site visit, and it's also within the company's duty to make sure that it's you'll get maybe an induction first, so that you know about their rules and regulations, know where there's assembly points, where are the emergency or exits. If there are emergency contact details, you can be informed of that, or just what to do in case of an emergency. So if and again, the client that you're visiting maybe doesn't have such a policy, maybe it's upon you to just request them, like, so if you need to know anything, their emergency contact details, emergency exits, so that you can be safe as well. Because safety, it's not entirely for someone to ensure it to you. You must make sure that you'll be safe all the time. So you must also report unsafe situations, which is very important. So if you are not trained to do that, to fix that problem, you must actually just report, and the qualified personnel will come and fix the problem. So yeah, you would see that a lot as you go forward. And then we have on the next slide treating incidents. So that's just goes without saying, because incident, they do happen, and you must always be ready, to take action. And here we're going to check specifically on electric shock, which can actually end a human life. straight away. So here we can talk about two ways to handle the situation if there's someone has been shocked got electrical shock. So if it's possible, you can turn off the supply, which is the preferred method. But if not possible, then there are other ways which are a bit risky though, by maybe getting a proper tool which is insulated to withstand the voltage that the person is exposed to. So that's by using something that's non-conductive, like a hose, plastic, piece of dry wood. It should be dry wood, not a wet one. Then you can quickly remove or separate the person from the source. But there, again, if you are not trained to do that, then you can just simply call for help, and then they will probably, be able to know what to do. So first thing, you must not touch the person if he's in electrical shock, because that can conduct to you, since it's you acting as a conductor. Then you get shocked as well. So there are also different types of currents. There's DC, which is the one that's a bit dangerous because it has a continuous flow due to the absence of frequency oscillation. So you cannot pull out your limb away from the life part. But if it's an AC, you can pull your limb away, because AC at some point it goes to zero since it's alternating. So this is, as I mentioned, that it's awareness, and you must know what you're actually dealing with, because this can happen at any time, on any person, even yourself. So just to go forward, to check about the emergency procedures reporting. So this is more like a incident report. So you must always take note of the following. These ones are just self-explanatory. So when reporting, know history of the incident, short description of the injury, how responsive the person was unconscious, if a person has a pulse. But obviously, if you don't have the experience to do that, because in some cases where you had a level 1, what's that, first aid, then you can know these procedures and how to do that, how to differentiate by looking at the person's skin. If the color is changed, then you do know if it gives you a clue or a sort of an incident you're dealing with. If it's gas, chemical exposure, stuff like that. So yeah, those ones are just self-explanatory. You can just say, take note of them when reporting an incident. So yeah, I think that will be my last slide. And the next one is just a summary of the topics discussed. And I think we covered all of them. Just make sure that you be safe all the time. As I conclude, don't be a Homer, do what's right. Don't be like Homer Simpson there, which is doing opposite of what is required. So yeah, the next one is just the contact details if you want to get in touch. But after all, this is the end. Thank you very much, and appreciate your time. I'm not sure if there are any questions on the chat. But yeah, I see Tida there is active in terms of giving some information, even with regards to the EPC sponsored price by Delta Carbon. So, but yeah, I think Tida, you can elaborate further on that if maybe there are no other questions. Or is there a hand from
There's one question from Nandipa.
Nandipa? All right, yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation, detailed one, of course. The question I want to ask, having gone through the ASH Act and some of the templates that are there, can you just allay me that the procedure, the reporting template that you just provided as the last slide, what form of guideline is it informed by, or it is just your practical engagement in the space? So I'm asking this because there's a tendency of taking an SOP and made a guide, which is not wrong, but that must be made explicit. That is just an SOP for that particular entity.
Okay. Just like you said, like I wouldn't say these possibly or practically where the guidelines might be coming from, because it's more of what you encounter as you go about doing the audits in different buildings and classifications class and also when you doing site visits, since you go to different buildings and of different environments. So these are the guidelines. They just arranged in a informative manner that generated from personal experience as you go about doing audits. So yeah, I'm not sure if that was your question. You were asking if maybe there's certain standards that are followed within this the procedures.
No, I think you've answered me, because the T2M
Okay.
are different from this one. So this is informed by your own experience. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Nandipa.
Any other questions?
Yes, Zarok, I've got a question to everybody on the platform. If they could possibly switch on the videos so that we can just meet each other, because with the Zoom, it's not always as friendly.
Well, mine's on. This is me.
Yes.
Can you just wait while I put my clothes on, please?
Yes, please, Barry. Thank you.
I often recognize the names, but I don't know the faces that goes with the name. So thank you guys for joining us.
Is it a pay-per-view, Barry, now?
Yeah. This, you see, it's just head and shoulders. You can't see below the belt.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. To the facilitator, Zadok, thank you. And also the speakers, Devaksha, Mitesh, Teboho. I really enjoyed it. I'm not an engineer, so this was very insightful for me. But I guess most of you guys, this might have been boring, but thank you for joining us. If you do have any questions for our speakers, feel free to ask them now.
Okay.
Very interesting. Thanks.
Okay. Seems like we don't have any more questions. So I would like to thank all the presenters who took time out to prepare slides and present them today. I'd like to thank Linda for making herself available. She probably didn't expect to do so much work today, but she did. So thank you, Linda. And I'd like to thank all of you who took time out of your busy schedules to attend this. Very appreciated. Thanks to Tita and Mutlajo for organizing this. And without further ado, I would like to bring this to an end and wish you all a happy day. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Oh, I've got some news. There's a
Oh, yes?
vaccine for malaria.
Oh, yeah. Well done to who do we thank for that?
I don't
We
know who
thank
developed
COVID.
it,
We
but
thank COVID for